Hello, my name is Peter and welcome to another video about Sailing Vessel Silverheels, My Rhodes 22. This is going to hopefully be the first of a series of videos once again on boat projects that we're doing here in the spring of the year. We did a series last year. This one I think will be a little bit shorter. Today is April 4th, so sailing season is rapidly approaching. We're starting this series in the same place we started last year's series, standing here in our workshop in front of the galley cabinetry for the boat. I pulled this out of the boat in the fall so I could work on it over the winter as I did last year. You may recall last year we built most of this cabinetry, including an ice box that we built and installed behind these two panels, which is accessed through a lid here in the countertop. And over the course of last summer's sailing season, I discovered that this ice box, despite the fact that it's significantly more efficient than the one it replaced, will still only hold ice for about 5 days. I'd put 3 1-gallon jugs of water frozen in, and 5 days later they'd be pretty much melted. And I could perhaps extend that by adding even more ice, but then there wouldn't be really very much room for food. So we've decided to take this one step further, and I've installed a refrigerator here instead. So before we go on to look at the installation more closely, I thought we'd cover a few facts and figures. The model refrigeration unit that I chose for this installation is the Isotherm 3201 ASU. That's an air-cooled unit. The condenser is mounted here behind this grate, which is here for air circulation. And inside the box, instead of a standard thin wall evaporator, this unit has a thicker, blockier thing called a holding plate, which is kind of like a thermal battery. So the ASU part of the model's name stands for Automatic Startup Unit. And what that's supposed to entail is some circuitry here in the control box that, when it's enabled, will sense the amount of electricity available in the system based on voltage. So, for instance, when your solar panel is in full sun and producing the maximum current, the unit will sense that and take advantage of it by charging up the holding plate with excess coldness, for lack of a better term. And then later on, say at night, can use that stored up coldness to maintain the temperature inside the refrigerator and use less electricity at that time. So on the whole, the advertising blurbs claim anyway that that's a more efficient approach, and so overall electrical consumption will be lower. And based on that claim, that's why I chose to go this route. So the documentation also states that this unit can support up to a 4.4 cubic foot refrigerator, and the box that's installed here is only about half of that at 2.2 cubic feet. So we're well within bounds on that score. So this mock-up here in the shop does include a full electrical installation. So one of the boat batteries is behind the cabinet, and everything's connected up, including the battery monitor. So I was able to do some testing in various configurations, and in a nutshell, what I found is that on average, the unit will consume about 1 amp of electricity per hour. So these tests were done over an extended period of time, at least a full day. So that's the average of multiple on and off cycles over that time period. So in a full 24-hour day, I'd expect to draw about 24 amps in total. So, and the last number I can throw out at you is the price. This unit cost me about $1,300. I happen to buy it from Defender, but they're pretty widely available. Before we get too far along in the deconstruction process here, while you can still clearly see it, I thought I'd point out the cooling tubes here on the back of the unit. The holding plate is inside just behind this area, and this tube comes straight out from that. And there's a total of, I think it's 6 feet of tube that they give you, which is obviously far more than I need for this particular installation, but you can't cut the tubes to custom lengths. The system comes all pre-charged and you just screw it up totally. So we've got some loops here, and then finally a little tube comes out of the big tube, so now you've got 2 tubes at this end, and they get connected and they're plumbed in a way that you can't get them backwards into the condenser. There's also a line here that I'm pretty sure what it carries is temperature information into the condenser's control unit. And we've got some power cables, and these are going to be wired directly into the positive excuse me, negative buses here behind the electrical panel, not through the breaker switches there. It'll have its own independent fuse that's actually mounted towards the front. I'm sure we'll get a look at it later. It's a 15 amp fuse, so that's really beyond the capacity of what the circuit panel can handle. All right, we need to keep taking things apart. So with the carcass partially disassembled, you can see the condenser unit here. It has a built-in fan here at the back that moves air from front to back. You recall there was a grate here in the front panel to allow air to enter, and as the air moves towards the hull, there are paths that it will find to find its way back out into the cabin. Connections are made in this area. Here we have the temperature sender that's built into the holding plate. That's the connection for that. There's positive and negative electrical connections, and actually this runs back to the 15 amp fuse I mentioned earlier. And there's a connection here that runs to the control box that was mounted up in this area. So here with the top removed from our insulated box, we can see into the inside a little better. This is a new box. It's not the same box we used for the ice box. The major design difference are that we had to make allowance for the condenser at this end, and we didn't need a drain for melted ice water, so that made life a little simpler in the construction there. The basic construction techniques are all the same, with polyisocyanurate foam 2 inches thick, plywood to protect the foam, and then that's covered with fiberglass and epoxy resin. We used 1/4 inch plywood top and sides, except for this end where we used 1/2 inch plywood just to give me a little something more substantial to attach the holding plate to, because the holding plate is pretty heavy, and as you can see, it's also not small. So that stands about 2.5 inches off the end wall, which, so it does take up some room in the interior, and hopefully the benefits will outweigh the costs. One small note here is that for the icebox, when I went to build that, I could only find 1-inch thick foam at Home Depot. This time they had an ample supply of 2-inch thick foam, so we used that, and that again made the construction a little easier. And we added provision for some internal dividers in here, which hopefully will make things easy to organize. So that's all there is to say about the refrigerator at this point. I'm sure we'll revisit this during the installation process, which may get interesting. We'll have to see. Just one final topic I wanted to cover quickly while we're here in the workshop is this project, which is a storage unit for the head. I know I've commented in at least one previous video that looked like there's a lot of storage area potentially that's behind the head that's currently not being used, and this project is my attempt to address that situation. We're in the early stages here, and this mock-up isn't really quite accurate because actually in the boat this cabinet will sit up on a stringer that's about 3 inches higher than the head floor, but you get the basic idea. And so we're in early stages here, although we have gotten the trickiest part done, which is to get the side pieces here scribed to fit the shape of the hull. And what that involved was taking some measurements. I chose to make them every 4 inches against a horizontal reference, and then transfer those measurements to a template made out of 1/4-inch plywood, and then go out to the boat and make marks and come back in here and shave here and there to improve the fit, and go back and forth a couple of times until the template seemed good enough, and then use the template to actually make the cabinet piece. So that out of the way, I now need to put more thought into exactly how I'm going to configure this space, but just wanted to show you the progress to date, and it's a little easier to see in total here, but we'll revisit this as well when it's actually installed in the boat. So that's going to be it for this video. There should be another one before too long, depending on how the weather cooperates with us. See you then, and thanks for watching.